Our story begins with Genzo, a professional wrestler known as Animal Mask, who's not only the world's greatest wrestler, but also a huge animal lover, especially his little dog Hiroyuki. On one fateful day, however, during his match for the World Championship title against his rival, Genzo is suddenly summoned to a fantasy world by Princess Altena, who asks him to become the hero of their world, and to help defeat the Demon Lord by killing all the evil beasts that infest the kingdom. But as an animal lover, Genzo refuses to help them hurt harmless beasts, and knocks the princess out with a German suplex. This of course surprises the guards, who in response chase Genzo out of the castle. Genzo then walks around town to figure out where exactly he is, but everyone understandably begins to avoid him, because they think he's some kind of weird pervert. But Genzo believes people are avoiding him because of his mask, so he removes it. Shortly after, Genzo finds himself cornered by Wolfgang, a criminal beast man, and his sister Misha, who plan to capture and sell Genzo as a slave, along with the weird beast he carries around. Their plans quickly fall apart, however, when Genzo becomes enamored with Wolfgang's fluffiness, due to his fondness for all animals, and easily overpowers him to nuzzle on his fur, which greatly embarrasses the beast man. Genzo then turns his attention to Misha in hopes of getting to pet her cat ears, but is interrupted by Edgar, a shady businessman, who is trying to sell Shigure, a wolf girl. Upon seeing how cute her animal features are, Genzo immediately suplexes Edgar and saves the wolf girl from being sold as a slave. The criminal trio flee shortly after, but swear to get revenge on Genzo someday. Shigure then thanks him for saving her life, but Genzo quickly realizes that he probably shouldn't have attacked Edgar, as Shigure reveals that she had actually begged Edgar to lend her money and promised to let him sell her as a slave if she couldn't pay it back. Since she's broke and can't repay Genzo either, she decides to take him to the Hunters Guild so they can make some money by completing quests. The guild master meets with Genzo and listens to his story, but none of it makes sense to him, and he begins to think Genzo is just a perverted lunatic. As such, he decides to send Genzo on a dangerous quest to slay powerful beasts. Meanwhile, the trio of criminals put a plan in motion to steal Hiroyuki, to sell it as an exotic pet in order to get revenge on Genzo. When Genzo arrives at the location of the quest and sees the three-headed dogs, he immediately sprints towards them, which greatly impresses the nearby soldiers. He easily overpowers the beasts with some wrestling moves, and manages to tame the whole pack with the power of love. In response, the awestruck soldiers give Genzo the nickname of Beast Killer. After returning to the guild and finally putting some clothes on, Genzo decides that rather than kill evil beasts, he will tame them, train them, and then sell them as pets in his pet shop. Shigure has no idea what a pet shop is supposed to be, but she believes in Genzo's vision of bringing harmony between demon beasts and people, and decides to join him in this business venture, along with a giant ant beast that Genzo seemingly befriended out of nowhere. Genzo and Shigure then celebrate their new partnership, but before they can open up a store, they'll need money to buy a building, and pay back Edgar for the money Shigure still owes him. While looking for high-paying quests, a hunter calls Genzo by his Beast Killer nickname. In anger, he punches the man through a wall because he hates that nickname, as he is a beast lover, not killer. Genzo then decides to catch a salamander and is asked by Heat Haze, the guild's strongest warrior, to join his team in order to slay the beast more efficiently. However, Genzo knocks Heat Haze out as he refuses to slay any beasts. Meanwhile, Shigure casually steals Heat Haze's sword from the ground. A few moments later, Genzo returns to the guild to turn in the quest, after having easily overpowered and tamed the salamander. Elsewhere in the world, a noble half-human, half-dragon girl named Lindabria grows bored of eating the same beast meat every day, and dreams of eating all kinds of delicious sweets and snacks, so she decides to run away from her castle. Meanwhile, Shigure visits Edgar to repay her debt, while Wolfgang remains absolutely terrified of Genzo and his perverted nuzzling. Afterwards, Genzo continues to tame all kinds of beasts in order to increase his collection for his pet shop. But since they still lack money, Genzo decides to accept a lucrative quest to deal with a hostile orc village that has been stealing crops from the humans. He travels to the orc stronghold and walks right in without a care in the world, and decides to challenge their king by greeting him with his feet. In response, the Orc King punches Genzo, but he just absorbs the punch like a true Chad, without even flinching. This surprises the orcs, as they've never seen a human go toe-to-toe with an orc before. As Genzo and the king trade blows back and forth, the two seem pretty evenly matched. But Genzo ultimately wins the fight with his signature suplex. This earns the respect of all the orcs in the village, who view Genzo as their king now. Surprisingly, this encounter ends amicably, and the orcs promise to stop stealing crops. With this quest complete, Genzo has enough money to purchase a shop, but fails to secure the bank loan needed to start running it as a business. Meanwhile, Lindabria appears in town. The next day, Genzo starts preparing to open his pet shop, but quickly realizes that without the bank loan, feeding the pets is impossibly expensive. While Shigure heads out to find more quests, Genzo runs into his furry neighbor and is immediately smitten by her, but she is quickly overwhelmed by his flirting and runs away. Shortly after, Genzo finds Lindabria passed out in his garden and takes her inside to rest instead. When she awakens, she introduces herself to Genzo and expresses how cute she thinks Hiroyuki is, before trying to eat him. Genzo of course snatches Hiroyuki out of Lindabria's hands and feeds her normal food instead, but this doesn't seem enough to satisfy her insatiable hunger. Lindabria then thanks Genzo and leaves, moments before Shigure arrives to tell him about another lucrative quest. At the Hunters Guild, they learn that a dragon has been seen attacking people and biting their necks, which greatly excites Genzo as he plans to capture it for his pet shop. Heat Haze appears once more to offer his beast-slaying services to Genzo, and is immediately drop-kicked in response. Once home, Genzo dons his wrestling gear and resurrects his animal mask persona. He then runs into town and places food in a cage to set a trap for Lindabria in order to question her about the dragon attacks. And not even a second later, Lindabria voluntarily walked into his cage to consume the free food. But before he has a chance to question her, he is spotted by hunters, who assume that he is a masked pervert that has trapped an innocent girl in a cage. With no other choice, Genzo immediately flees the scene of the crime, but is shocked to see Lindabria running by his side for some reason. The two are soon confronted by Carmilla, Lindabria's servant, who also assumes Genzo is a perverted kidnapper. But while Carmilla introduces herself, Genzo and Lindabria throw rocks at her to shut her up. Angered, Carmilla attempts to attack Genzo, but his wrestler strength proves superior, and he overpowers her with relative ease, before escaping once more with Lindabria. While hiding, Genzo comes up with the brilliant idea of having Lindabria put on a mask as well, so they won't look suspicious and will just look like a normal masked couple. Lindabria understandably goes along with this genius plan. Thankfully, Shigure intercepts the two weirdos before anyone else, and manages to sneak them back to the pet shop. Once there, Lindabria is surprised that Animal Mask was actually Genzo all along, and he explains that when he wears the mask, he becomes a completely different person. Moments later, Carmilla appears once more, but does not recognize Genzo without his mask. Following Shigure's advice, Genzo neutralizes Carmilla with holy water and garlic, while Lindabria explains that she is from one of 4 noble families who directly serve the Demon King, but that she did not attack any humans as they don't taste very delicious. Afterwards, Lindabria asks Genzo if she can stay with him and help out at the pet shop, because she wants to be close to Hiroyuki, and much to Shigure's displeasure, Genzo hires Lindabria to work in the shop, and nicknames her Hanako to hide her true identity. But when Genzo then learns that the dragon attacking people was actually Carmilla sucking their blood, he German suplexes her. Sometime later, Shigure despairs as all the shop's money is being wasted on food for Hanako's bottomless stomach and other nonsense. To make up for this, Shigure decides to sell Heat Haze's supposedly lost swords for a hefty chunk of money. Meanwhile, Genzo finds himself distracted by his furry neighbor once again, and as they flirt, she warns him that she's married with kids. But Genzo responds that he will love her fluffy husband as much as her. Overwhelmed once more, she runs away from him. Shigure actually witnesses this strange interaction unfold, and begins to regret her life choices. Back in modern-day Japan, we see that Mao, Genzo's rival, has spent his entire wrestling career always losing to Genzo, only for Genzo to completely vanish in the middle of their championship match that Mao had trained so hard for. This has led to Mao eventually becoming depressed, and he refuses to wrestle anyone except Genzo. Back in Crazy Land, Shigure forces Genzo to take on a new job, so Misha and Wolfgang take advantage of his absence to finally steal Hiroyuki. But Wolfgang becomes distracted by Hiroyuki's cuteness, and Genzo's aunt friend arrives to stop the kidnappers. Edgar later finds Misha and Wolfgang beaten up, as their theft was foiled by Genzo's aunt friend, leaving Wolfgang even more traumatized. When Genzo returns home, he learns about Hiroyuki almost being stolen, and visits the culprits in their home. He then drags Wolfgang outside and punishes him by spinning him round and round, and eventually launching him, which impresses nearby citizens, including Klaus. Their applause makes Genzo nostalgic about his previous matches against Mao and his wrestling career as a whole. Elsewhere, the princess of all vampires, Joanna, receives permission from the Demon Lord to summon a Demon King from an alternate world, to defeat the hero summoned by Princess Altena. Back in Japan, Mao consults with a doctor to cure his depression. But the doctor tells Mao that he's basically just obsessed with Genzo and needs a new hobby. While lamenting Genzo's disappearance, Mao is suddenly summoned to the same fantasy world by Joanna. She asks him to defeat the hero, but he is just confused about where he is. Joanna then shows him a drawing of the hero, which he instantly recognizes as Genzo, and becomes ecstatic that he'll finally be able to rematch him. Later on, Joanna reveals that her true desire is to defeat Hanako, with whom she has a long-standing childhood rivalry. Because despite Hanako's carefree attitude, she is the only one who's been able to defeat Joanna time and time again, without breaking a sweat. As a result, Joanna spent years studying Hanako to find her weaknesses, but was never able to find one she could exploit. Years later, the two ran into each other again at a party, but Hanako had no recollection of who Joanna was. After they talked for a while, Joanna offered to replace Hanako's worthless servant Carmilla with a more powerful vampire who would secretly spy on Hanako to find her weaknesses. Despite knowing how weak Carmilla is, Hanako agreed that if Rose could defeat her servant, she would replace Carmilla with a servant of Joanna's choosing. Unsurprisingly, Rose quickly defeated Carmilla, who soon began to cry and beg her mistress not to replace her. Joanna agreed to let Hanako keep Carmilla, but only if Hanako kneeled in front of her, which she did without any resistance. Joanna and Rose left shortly after seeing how easy it was to make Hanako kneel, and celebrated over having finally defeated Hanako by humiliating her and making her look completely pathetic. Their carriage was then stopped by Hanako, who informed Joanna and Rose that, although she doesn't mind losing, she has a responsibility to maintain her family's reputation. She then transformed into a dragon and effortlessly defeated Joanna and Rose, humiliating them both. Sometime later, after hearing how Hanako ran away from home, Joanna became convinced that Hanako left to find and defeat the hero so she could gain all the glory for herself and humiliate Joanna again. And so she summoned Mao in hopes of defeating the hero first. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Genzo, a blue-haired girl is secretly watching him. She is a hunter named Celis, who approaches Genzo and is instantly punished for calling him Beast Killer. Celis then explains that she's actually an inexperienced hunter, and that the guild master suggested that she ask Genzo to train her. Genzo refuses at first, but changes his mind and agrees to train her after realizing that Celis is actually a lizard woman with shiny scales, and not just an ordinary girl. They begin training, though Genzo's enthusiasm goes up and down, based on how much of her scaly body he can see while she works out. The other girls also try to help her training, but all end up giving her horrible advice. When her training is complete, Genzo gives her a wrestling mask, along with the name Celis XXL for her wrestling persona. But Celis has no idea what wrestling even is, and refuses to wear something so humiliating. She then reveals that she wanted training specifically from Genzo, who is known to be friendly with beasts, because hunters at the guild were making fun of her for being a lizard woman. Upon hearing this, Genzo heads to the guild and furiously beats up every single hunter, until the guild master interferes and manages to calm Genzo down a tiny bit. The hunters then realize that they were wrong to bully Celis and apologize to her. But Genzo refuses to accept their apology until the hunters agree to fight Celis in a duel, and acknowledge her as an equal when she defeats them with Genzo's signature suplex. Klaus, the bank representative, watched the duel unfold and witnessed how excited it made everyone, and saw potential in this idea. He approaches Genzo later that night with plans to hold a fighting tournament, which he promises would earn Genzo a lot of money for the pet shop. Genzo refuses at first, but agrees after realizing how much he misses wrestling. As they begin to plan the tournament, Genzo tries to include beasts in the matches, but Klaus suggests that they should invite beastmen instead. Later that day, Genzo sees his furry neighbor that he always flirts with and visits her home. Her husband returns shortly after, only to find his wife talking to Genzo, and believes that the muscular stud is trying to steal his wife. As the two men begin to trade blows, the husband remembers the thrill and excitement of fighting, something he had long forgotten. The two men seemingly make up moments later, and the furry husband leaves with Genzo in hopes of rediscovering the glory and thrill of his youth. His wife, however, is a bit confused that Genzo appears to have stolen her husband. Genzo then tries to ask Wolfgang to join the tournament, but he is still too traumatized, so Misha decides to participate in his stead. In the following days, Genzo also recruits Celis, Carmilla, orcs, and hunters, though he knocks out Heat Haze for trying to use weapons. And as the fighters train and bond in preparation for the tournament, a hooded figure watches from a distance. Meanwhile, Princess Altena learns about the tournament from a flyer and immediately recognizes Genzo as the hero she summoned, who also humiliated her. When the tournament matches officially begin, they draw a large crowd and are hugely popular, and everyone seems to be getting along and having a good time. Shigure also set up a booth to seemingly sell merch, but in reality she's secretly selling spicy pictures of the muscular fighters. For the final fight, Genzo and Carmilla form a tag team against Misha and Heat Haze. But when Misha is in trouble, the hooded figure is accidentally revealed to be Wolfgang, who is reluctantly coerced into replacing Heat Haze. As the crowd grows rowdier, Shigure admits the drama of Wolfgang and Genzo's rivalry is good entertainment. But in the ring, Genzo is just traumatizing Wolfgang again by nuzzling him. After winning the finals, Genzo declares the tournament a success and everyone celebrates in the guild. Klaus also reveals that the tournament was immensely profitable, which makes Shigure extremely happy until she learns that Genzo, Carmilla, and Hanako racked up more bills throughout the tournament than what they made in profit. Sometime later, after soldiers locate Genzo, Princess Altena tries to convince him to become this world's hero, but when Genzo refuses to fight the Demon King, Altena orders her strongest knights to kill him so she can summon someone new. But Genzo just defeats all of her men before they can even land a finger on him, a sight that Princess Altena just can't believe. Afterwards, Genzo grabs Princess Altena in a seemingly romantic way and swiftly throws her out of his house. Meanwhile, Mao sees one of Genzo's tournament flyers and finally figures out where Genzo is. When Genzo returns home one day, he finds Joanna, Rose, and Mao waiting for him in the shop. Rose, Carmilla, Joanna, and Hanako resume their petty arguments until Mao angrily interrupts them and challenges Genzo to finish their championship match. Joanna, assuming that Mao is referring to some kind of evil match to the death, also challenges Hanako and Carmilla. Klaus suggests including their fights in the next tournament, and everyone agrees. Afterwards, Carmilla puts her pride aside and secretly asks Genzo to train her in wrestling so she can finally defeat Rose. After several days of hard work, Klaus and Shigure manage to redesign the wrestling ring to cope with a larger audience, and with the use of magic, they are able to broadcast the tournament as if it was taking place in modern-day Japan. The first match sees Heat Haze, Celis, and Princess Altena wrestling demon beasts from Joanna's army of evil. The princess is easily overpowered and humiliated once again, but she begins to find that public humiliation is quite enjoyable after all. Meanwhile, Celis and Heat Haze win the fight despite Princess Altena doing nothing. In the second match, the furry husband and Orc King team up together to defeat Cyclops from Joanna's army of demon beasts. The furry wife watches in awe as her husband wins and thanks Genzo in her thoughts for rekindling her love for her husband. In the third match, Misha and Wolfgang are easily defeated by gorilla beasts and are overall just thankful that their suffering is finally over. In the fourth match, Carmilla wrestles Rose and finds that Genzo's training has actually made her stronger. And after being knocked down, she gets back up and promptly slams Rose to the ground with one of Genzo's wrestling techniques. Unfortunately, she celebrates before pinning Rose to the ground, so Rose knocks her out with a German suplex of her own. Despite that, Genzo admits it was a good match, and Hanako congratulates her on fighting for her own pride, which makes it Carmilla's victory as far as Hanako is concerned. Carmilla cries tears of joy as Genzo prepares to face Mao in the final. As the finals begin, Mao expresses his anger towards Genzo for running away during their championship match, and in between their attacks, they manage to explain the misunderstanding and why they were both suddenly summoned to this new world. After hearing their conversation, Joanna and Rose begin to worry that their Demon King might be an idiot after all, and not a powerful Dark Lord from another world. But despite Mao's best efforts, he is once again defeated by Genzo's signature German suplex. While he lays on the floor defeated, Mao realizes what it means to fight for the love of the sport, and not just for glory. With their rematch finally over, Mao happily agrees to have another one someday. As Joanna leaves, Hanako warns her that it is her job to observe the hero, and she will not tolerate Joanna interfering anymore. Afterwards, while everyone celebrates another successful tournament, Shigure almost loses her temper after realizing that, once again, the profits were wasted by Genzo and friends. But lets it go after seeing how it has brought humans and beast men closer together, which brings Genzo one step closer to accomplishing his dreams.